violence against police. But as we've observed as the afternoon has worn on, it is not exactly a surprise that this protest was going on, that there had been talk of this kind of activity. And so, there will be a lot of questions in the coming days about why there wasn't a better response. That's for another day. We're still in a crisis right here. This is the nation's capital on an evening like no other, where protesters were able to breach the security as Congress met in a joint session to perform one of its most sacred constitutional duties, to certify electors, to ensure the peaceful transfer of power to a new president. And instead, what we saw was rioters breach the gates, come through the building, make it onto the Senate floor, the House floor, stroll through Statuary Hall as though they were on a visitor's tour. Congress stopped. The members of Congress evacuated. They're still in a secure location. So as we hit 6 o'clock on the East Coast, there is a curfew going into effect on the streets of Washington, D.C., as law enforcement tries to catch up and get this situation under control. We've heard from the president-elect and we've heard from President Trump.
What an unfortunate camera shot.
And we now turn to Leon Panetta, who, of course, is the former defense secretary under the Obama administration, a former White House chief of staff going back to the Clinton administration, and a former congressman who knows that building well. Secretary Panetta, I guess just before we get into the security measures, I just want your gut, how you feel at this hour, seeing the images that we've all been watching.
Savannah, the scenes that I've seen today are the most disturbing events that I've seen in my entire public life. I never expected to see rioters take over the Capitol of the United States, stop our democracy from functioning, and basically undermine the very form of government that depends on both order and freedom. And to see that happen is something I thought I would never see in my lifetime.
And the business of the Congress must go on. We're told from our reporting from inside the room that senators and members of Congress are very focused, almost defiant in their feeling that they have an obligation to go on and continue this work, even if it goes late into tonight. What do you know about, without giving away anything, what do you know about the plans that would have been in place for something like this? I mean, I talked about it a little bit with Secretary Napolitano earlier in our coverage, saying, I'm sure you had plans on the shelf for an attack on our Congress. You probably didn't imagine that it would come from inside, from Americans, from our very own
They're not
people.
Americans. American cards revoked.
As you may know, I signed a letter with all 10 of the former living defense secretaries that raised the concern about the possibility that something like this might raise the issue of using the military in order to change the results of an election, and we cautioned against that. But it was clear at the time that there are those that were going to conduct this kind of protest. The president obviously was saying things to incite what we saw today. Everybody knew that, in fact, that something like this was very possible. And I'm a little surprised, very frankly, that sufficient steps were not taken to secure the Capitol and to make sure that something like this did not happen.
And Secretary Panetta, I'll just bring you up to date because the president tweeted about 7 minutes ago, and this is what he said. These are the things and events that happen when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from great patriots who have been badly and unfairly treated for so long. Go home with love and in peace. Remember this day forever. How does that statement strike you?
It strikes me as not only irresponsible, but undermining the very role that he should be playing as President of the United States, which is to make very clear that this kind of behavior is unacceptable.
Harsh words from you, though.
Every principle of law and order that he said he stands for.
So call it treason.
And further undermines the very democracy that he is sworn to uphold as President of the United States.
So call it what it is.
What he's saying is not helpful to
Not helpful
the
is
law
not the word
enforcement people
treason.
that are there now,
What he's saying is
trying
treason.
to make sure that they clear the Capitol and allow it to get back to the business of our democracy. It only goes to show that ultimately, as he leaves office, he will bear responsibility for what we saw today.
Secretary Panetta, is this a turning point? I mean, after everything that's transpired and, you know, things that have happened that have never happened before, and life just seems to go on as usual. But this is different. Do you feel that this will be a turning point in which members of Congress, your former colleagues, Republicans and Democrats, stand up and say, enough is enough? Or is this just going to be just another day in the Trump administration?
Well, I don't think this can be passed off as just another day.
So you're going to impeach him?
What we saw happen to the Capitol of the United States, and what we saw happen in terms of the interruption of our system of government is a serious event. And I worry that if we don't take steps to come together and govern this country, that the scenes we saw today will inspire others to take advantage of the situation. This is a serious moment in our history, and we ought not to just excuse it as just somehow, some kind of protest. A line was crossed today, and that line represents whether or not our democracy is going to function in the future or whether it's going to be held under siege in the future. And the leadership of this country will determine the answer to that question.
And Secretary Panetta, before I let you go, you're the former CIA director, you're former Defense Department, the Secretary of Defense. When you think about our adversaries around the world, watching these scenes, what goes through your mind?
It's a terrible message that's going out because our adversaries will see what we have seen today and just sense it as another sign of weakness on the part of the United States. And I worry that because of those scenes,
with traitors.
that our adversaries will use that to take advantage of the United States. This is not a good moment in terms of the image of the United States and the values that we represent. It's a moment where we are very vulnerable to those that want to undermine our democracy.
Secretary Panetta, thank you for your time,
Like
sir.
Trump's
We appreciate it.
boss,
I want to
Putin.
turn to our correspondent, Yasmin Vsugin, who's on the grounds of the